Screen properly though?
Yeah, I see your screen.
I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so I apologize for the technical foolishness we had before. Oh, and this thing is in the middle here. I'm going to try to move this down if I can. There we go. But let's just get right into it. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me? So basically, I've been a photojournalist for about close to 30 years. But for the last 6, I've been working as a TV reporter for Global News. I used to work for the Montreal Gazette before that. And it's something that I've thoroughly enjoyed. One of the main reasons I like what I do is that I learn something every single day. And every single day is completely unpredictable. But it's also something that I take very, very seriously. The thing that I like to emphasize about what we do, about what I do, is that I take very, very seriously the responsibility to report, because that's really what it comes down to. It's about our responsibility as journalists, as visual journalists, as photographers, photojournalists. I'm just going to let somebody else in here. Is that we have a responsibility to report on what is happening. I'm just going to try to pull up my notes here, if I can find them. Just a second here. I lost my train of thought. Just a second here. There's one thing I should mention is that some of the images that I'm going to show might be a little bit difficult for some people to look at. So what I'll try to do is, as much as possible, you might be able to see beforehand what I'm going to show on the screen. But if there's anything that anybody thinks is too difficult to look at, please let me know, and I will remove it from the screen. Just a second, I'm just trying to get my notes, which for some reason I can't find. Just a second here. Right. So our primary responsibility is to report. It's to document history. It's to document the way we live. It's to document the things we see. One thing that people like to say about journalism is that it's the first draft of history. Now, one thing I used to tell my students is that photography, and especially photojournalism, it's a very powerful tool. And if used properly, it can serve as a really, really good tool to record the way we live, to record our culture, to record just life in general. But if misused, it can cause great harm. Because of that, we try to use a very, very strict code of conduct, code of ethics that varies slightly between from one news organization to the other. Each news organization has its own sort of code of conduct, code of ethics, the way we're supposed to conduct our business, the way we're supposed to conduct our reporting. Different organizations may add or remove some depending on their specific needs. But for news organizations that deal specifically with visual journalism, i.e. wire services like Reuters or Canadian Press or Associated Press, that deal strictly with photojournalism, they have a very, very strict list of codes of practice that we have to follow. I'm just going to go through some of the images that I have here really, really quickly, just so you have an idea of what it is that we do from day to day before we get into the actual codes of ethics. So like I said, this is just one of the things that I've been working on for a number of years now, is to document different cultural traditions within Canada. We are made up of a whole bunch of different cultures, different people from different backgrounds, and some of those traditions are disappearing. And I've spent the last, I'm going to say maybe 10, 15 years trying to document some of these traditions, some of which you're going to see in some of these pictures that that I'm going to be showing tonight. The pictures that we take document or capture various aspects of life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the unpleasant. What we are responsible to do, or at the end of the day, is to make sure that we are accurate and that we are fair. When it comes to the codes of ethics, I'm just going to bring up another screen here, just so that we can look at some of the images that here we go. Now, one of the things that we really are expected to do is to make sure that whatever we photograph, one thing to bear in mind is that whatever we shoot, it cannot capture everything that we see. It cannot capture an entire story. So our responsibility is to make sure that whatever we shoot, we try as much as possible to put it into context. And that is where captions come in. And so for every single picture that we shoot, it's not, I mean, of course, you know, we're bombarded by images every day, images on iPhones, on Instagram and Facebook, whatever the case may be. Most of those pictures don't have any information to go with them. To make sure that we have a complete story, we have got to make sure that our captions are complete. And as you can see here, this one describes this image. This is sort of the aftermath of the shooting in Quebec City a number of years ago. And this is one gentleman who, this was the first time that the mosque reopened after the shooting. And this is one of the gentlemen who lost a couple of people. And he basically came into the mosque. The mosque opened that morning and they invited media in because they want to speak to us. And this one gentleman walked in and broke down. And, you know, my responsibility in that moment, our responsibility in that moment is to describe and document what it is that these people are going through. It is one thing to say that, yes, this happened. Yes, they were feeling or experiencing these emotions. They were experiencing this loss, this fear, this anger. But whenever we see images like this that sort of speaks to what it is that people are telling us they're feeling, then it's our responsibility to make sure that we capture it. All right. This also another case where, and many of these images that I'm going to be showing you for this first part.
Is it possible to make the images larger, Phil?
Oh, this is almost the entire screen.
Is it possible?
We don't see the pictures full screen.
Oh,
we don't see the pictures full screen. We see tiny, tiny, tiny
Yeah.
little.
Okay, let me try something else here.
Ah,
That's
okay.
better.
Getting more workable. Okay.
But you still don't see the full screen?
No, but at least we can see them. We couldn't see them before at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's really unfortunate. So this second one is, I'm just going to see if I can do something here. I have an idea. Just give me a second. I'm going to try something a little different. Try share screen again. Here we go.
Sharing.
How's that?
Yeah, okay, it's highlighting. Okay, now
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, good. So can you see it full screen?
now it's full screen.
All right. So the one before. All right. So the one before was a picture of a. Oops, sorry about that. Can you see that one full screen?
Yeah, yes.
So that's the one from the mosque. This one was taken in Haiti in the days following the earthquake. Now, looking at this, you know, people can draw any number of conclusions. But basically what was happening, there was looting of stores, looting of homes, looting of a whole bunch of different places, simply because people had nothing to eat. And so, you know, people can draw whatever conclusions they want from this image. But again, you know, captions are important. And so that is why we make sure that to put things into context, we write complete captions to make sure that people have as much as possible the full story. So I'm gonna close this here. This also was from another scene of a tragedy. This was from Lac Megantic. Now, one of the things that we try to we abide by is to make sure that we are not manipulated by people in authority. So this is one example where the police officers who were in charge of the scene, they tried to stop us from taking pictures of what was happening. And so they erected a whole bunch of barriers. And so what some news organizations actually had to do was to hire helicopters to be able to show what was happening on the scene. Now, for something like this that's of historical significance, it is vital for us to have a visual record of it. And so that is what we had to, at some point, we actually had to find ways around the barriers to make sure that, the rest of the province, the rest of the country, the rest of the world were seeing what was happening at this location. I remember at one point when they got us closer to the scene, we were still unable to see what was happening because of the barriers that were put up, but some of us were able to get on top of a roof. And the cops, it was SQ at this point, actually came to us and actually tried to intimidate us, trying to get us to get off the roof, even though the person who owned the house, for them it was okay, completely okay for us to be there. So I called my office. They contacted at this point I was with the Gazette. I called the Gazette contacted their lawyer. Canadian Press called their office, they contacted their lawyer, and every news organization who had somebody on that roof that day contacted the news organization, and each lawyer got back to us and said the cops had no right to move us from the roof because we have a responsibility to report. The public had the right to see what was happening. And so that's what we did. The other thing that we try to be cautious about is stereotyping. And this wasn't actually my picture. This is a picture that was shot by a former colleague of mine, Gordon Beck. It is very important for us to make sure that, well, as much as possible, we don't reinforce stereotypes as much as possible. One of the things that we have to be conscious about is, and be honest about, is our own biases, whenever we shoot certain things. Now, this was shot at a gay pride parade. And for a lot of people, when they think about gay pride, when they think about people from the LGBT community, certain images come to mind. Now, in trying to not reinforce certain stereotypes, it is difficult sometimes to sort of overthink things, because in our attempts to not reinforce certain stereotypes, sometimes it's easy to miss what's actually in front of the lens. And so what I say to my students, and what we say to each other as colleagues sometimes, is always shoot. You can always decide to not publish. Now, in a case like of a gay pride parade, it's sometimes difficult to know what to shoot and what to not shoot. In this case, my former colleague Gordon Beck decided he was going to shoot this picture, and it's basically a photograph of this person who took a picture of the person who was behind him, and him reacting to what he was seeing on the screen. And in my opinion, this is just a nice slice of life moment of somebody reacting to the reality around him. This second picture was shot by me. It's just another way of showing the Gay Pride Parade. So instead of shooting what was actually on the parade itself, I decided to photograph, the reaction of these, or the reaction of the audience to what was happening in front of them. So that's just another way of showing or of documenting what it is that we see.
Wonder what they see in the front.
Any questions so far? Any comments? Any concerns?
What are they laughing at in the front?
Well, I don't remember what was in front, but I just think it was the fact that he was wearing chaps, the fact that he was that's the way he was dressed. I really can't remember what was happening in front in the front of the class there. Very often when people think of gangs, they think of Black men, dressed a certain way with a certain hairstyle. Now, there are times when you simply can't avoid stereotypes that we have. And again, you can't, we have a very serious responsibility to report, and we can't afford to let our efforts to not reinforce certain stereotypes stop us from documenting what's in front of us. Now, this was a funeral for a gang member who was shot and killed. And, you know, for me, why I took that picture was it showed, or this picture actually shows it shows the pain, it shows the despair of what these people were going through. I have no way of knowing what was happening in their own heads, but this is something that happened at a church during a funeral. And yes, it does reinforce certain stereotypes, but on the other hand, it did happen. So, you know, I photographed it. And so it's really a difficult and delicate task sometimes to balance the right and the need for the public to know with, in this case, reinforcing certain stereotypes. So it's a very, very delicate balance sometimes. And, you know, we don't publish these images. This image was published in the Gazette, and we don't publish images lightly. Sometimes it takes a lot of discussion between the photographer, between the editors, to determine when and whether to publish something. This is another example of when, you know, it's hard to avoid stereotypes. The thing is, what I usually tell my students is, as long as you are aware of your own biases, as long as you are aware of certain stereotypes or the possibility of reinforcing certain stereotypes in the pictures that you take, as long as you're completely aware of that and you're honest with yourself about that, then go ahead and shoot. And in this case, can anybody guess what event this was, or who these gentlemen might have been?
They look like mafioso.
Members of the mafia, yes.
Okay.
Right, and you know, for sure, they certainly absolutely match certain, you know, this stereotypical image of what a mob person looks like. But this was the funeral for a mob boss in Montreal. So yes, it reinforces certain stereotypes, but then again, it did happen, and so, you know, we have a responsibility to record it. This was shot in Haiti. This person was this is actually published on the front page of the Gazette, which is why I don't have too much problem showing it or sharing it with you tonight. If it's difficult for anybody, please let me know. I'll shift to another image. But the other thing that we really have to pay attention to is how we show people or show victims of violence. In this case, this was a gentleman who residents told us was shot by police because he was allegedly looting some place or other. Now, what was happening in the days following the earthquake was that one of the jails was completely destroyed and a lot of the criminals escaped. So the police had, even if they were to arrest somebody, they had nowhere to put them. And so instead of arresting people, they were just simply shooting people down on the streets. Now, my job is not to judge whether or not that was right or wrong. My responsibility is to document that reality and preserve it for history. Now, he was shot, and, you know, people came by and stood around him. Nobody lifted a finger to help because, you know, again, I can't judge why they didn't. But one of the arguments was that there was nothing for them to do. There was nothing that they could do because all the hospitals were destroyed. All the field hospitals were jam-packed with casualties. And so, you know, this person actually collapsed just outside a cemetery. And their thinking was, you know, what are we going to do? So, you know, think what you will, but this was the reality at the time. And again, you know, it was my responsibility as a reporter, as a photographer, as a photojournalist to document this, right? It's a record of history. Any questions? This is another example of something that was pretty tragic. Again, in the days following the earthquake in Haiti, again showing the extent of the tragedy, of the damage, the human toll. Again, responsibility to document this, responsibility to report. And again, of course, like I said, the importance of having captions, a full caption there explaining what happened in the situation and the circumstances. This, again, victims of violence, this is COVID. It can be argued that maybe, you know, again, you know, we have to be careful about how we portray victims of violence because for reasons of privacy, for reasons of pride, whatever the case may be, these are things that we have to consider. And it can be argued, I suppose, that in this case, this person just, you know, there's this we're denying her dignity, we are invading her privacy, and all these arguments are completely legitimate. But again, sometimes we have to weigh that against the public's right, the public's need to know. This was an historical, this is COVID, an historical once in a century event that happened to all of us. And this is again documenting the toll it took on us, on the city, on people, on our loved ones. This person was being wheeled from a long-term care home, one of the ones in the West Island where there were multiple deaths in a few days. And so, this is what we have to do. This is what the job entails. And the thing to do is, whenever we're shooting these things, the thing to do is to not think about whether or not you should shoot it, because if you wait too long for it to decide whether or not to shoot it, the moment is going to pass. So the thing to do is to really shoot and then decide whether or not it's worth publishing. That's because the thing that we cannot do in journalism is stage events or recreate events, which is something I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. Just another shot of a body being removed from one of the long-term care homes where there were multiple deaths over just a few days. That's just another shot. Now, when it comes to there's a lot of things that people can do with photography, especially with Photoshop and other imaging processing software that's available. With Instagram, you can use a whole bunch of filters to create things and whatnot. In journalism, you cannot do that at all. Now, this is one example of a case where a photographer decided that one image wasn't good enough. And so what he did was basically use the first image here at the top, the second image here, combine the two to create an image, the third image at the bottom. So the photographer figured that in this image here, there was a pole here that was distracting, right? But he figured that with the soldier here with his arm outstretched was a nice moment. He got a second picture where the soldier's arm wasn't there, and the person was looking, this displaced person was looking up at the soldier, but there was no pole here at the side. So he decided to combine both images to make, in his eyes, a perfectly composed image. Perfectly composed, absolutely. The moment here was nice with the soldier's arm outstretched and this person here looking at the soldier. The problem is that it's not the truth. This moment here in this picture did not happen. And so when this picture was published, a couple of sharp-eyed readers noticed that there were a couple of elements, I haven't seen them yet, but there are a couple of elements in this picture that were repeated, and contacted the newspaper. And basically, the newspaper contacted the photographer and said, listen, send your gear back, don't come back, you're fired. As simple as that. So this is how serious it is. We cannot afford as journalists to have people questioning the veracity of the pictures that we produce. There are enough lies being spread. There's enough conspiracy theories out there. The last thing we want is to have people question whether or not the things that we shoot, the pictures that we show are true. We can't afford that at all. And the last thing I want to have happen is somebody contacting me and me having problems explaining to them that what I shot, what I produced, what I published was actually the truth. So these are things that we really have to seriously think about. We get fired for lying with pictures. It's no joke. I know that there are people who, bend the rules and break the rules, but it doesn't happen, or it's not supposed to happen. Any questions so far? Everybody's so quiet.
It's not so much a question.
Yeah.
You say that you're sort of presenting the image and that you do not necessarily have a point of view about the image. I question that. I think well,
I do have a point of view. The thing is the thing that we're not supposed to is to allow our point of view to dictate too much what we show.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
for sure you have a point of view, and that determines how you frame things and what elements you allow within the frame. Okay. Absolutely. It also dictates which images you choose to show.
Absolutely.
Right? That's where
if you
we're
didn't have a point of view, your work wouldn't be interesting.
I'm sorry?
I said, if you didn't have a point of view, your work wouldn't be interesting as it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, the trick is to be fair. The trick
Absolutely.
is to be accurate. The trick is to be truthful
Okay,
and to be honest with yourself. For sure, we all have biases. Absolutely. I mean, for example, a picture like this, some photographers might choose to not show it. In my opinion, this is an important historical moment that has to be documented, right? And there was another one that I want to show that I don't have time to bring up now, but yeah, for sure, your own personal feelings, your own personal beliefs, for sure, that is going to inform how you approach your job. But at the end of the day, you do have a responsibility to report. You do have a responsibility to shoot. And even in a case like, let's say, for example, my assignment was to go out and to document over a period of time, over a period of days or weeks or months, as the case may be, to document the impact that COVID has or is having on the society. I have to show it, even if I don't like some of the images, even if I don't like some of the moments that present themselves to me, I still have a responsibility to document it because I have my audience who's depending on me. Especially when I went to Haiti, for example. I mean, some of the pictures. I mean, people were grabbing us by the arm and pulling us to say, "Listen, show this, show that," because the world needs to see what we're going through.
right.
So yeah, even though it was, and there were some photographers, there were some reporters who had problems, who had real difficulty in seeing what was in front of us, and they had to leave. These things happen. These things do happen. There's another thing that I want to bring up, and does everybody remember Alan Kurdi? That's the refugee, the asylum seeker who was who drowned a few years ago. I'm just going to try to see if I can find the image here. Alan Kurdi.
Not the child.
That's a child. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember.
I'm just trying to see. If
The
I can...
3-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In any case, I was trying to find the raw images that that were shot that day, but they're around there somewhere. But see, that was a tough one because, and the difficulty with which or the difficulty that editors had in selecting the picture that they used on their front page, or whether or not they used on the front page, is going to be illustrated in the next few examples. So the Gazette chose to not show that picture on the front page, but instead show it on the inside. And that's the picture of Alan Kurdi, Edward picking the child up. I'm just going to scroll through here just some examples of how different newspapers handled that. And I'd say there's no right or wrong way of handling this.
That's wrong.
And some papers decided to not publish the pictures, and there was a huge uproar over whether or not the picture should have been published. I don't know how to answer that one. Right, the Ottawa Citizen decided to go with it on the front page. The National Post went with it on the front page, showing the child's face.
There's such a difference between the father holding the child and the child lying by itself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this wasn't the father. I believe this is some sort of emergency service worker. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry.
Emergency service worker. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seemed like most people went with this with that picture, but the Globe Mail went with that one showing the child's face. For some people, for some editors, showing the child's face was just too much. But these are the things that editors grapple with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's one more thing that I really want to show you, and I'm hoping I could find it. Things I had closed all my windows when I restarted, and so it might take me a bit of time. But there's something that I want to bring up or to address with you, and it has to do with further conversations about ethics and whether or not things are how we should go about. Start typing. No, that's not it. Nope. Balance, that's not it. Features data life. Right. We're almost there. Nope, that's not it. Okay, so while I'm looking for that, I did mention before that one of the things that we can't do in photojournalism is set things up or stage things. And I know that you probably have seen some photographers do that, but it's really highly unethical. And I'm trying to find the example that I really want to show you to illustrate why it is such a very bad idea. That's not it. That's not it. Anyway, it's this photographer in Spain who decided that he was going to do a documentary or a series of photographs, a photography documentary on prostitution in a certain town in Spain. And I think he spent 8 years documenting the lives of prostitutes in that certain town. He actually did a book about it. Now, what he did was according to what he said in interviews, is that he first spoke to the prostitutes to try to get permission to photograph them, and they told him no. And so what he did instead was disguised himself as a land surveyor and went in the area and got basically snuck pictures of them. So he showed up, he said, listen, I'm a land surveyor, I'm going to have a camera, I'm going to be taking pictures of the area because of my work. And the prostitutes basically said to him, by all means, go ahead, not knowing that his intent was to take pictures of them. Now, yes, he got images that nobody else would have gotten. I mean, they were completely candid images. Here we go. Oops, sorry, just give me a second here, please. There we go. Oh, before I get to that, so this is another example of using image manipulation software to enhance a picture. So this is a picture of a volcano. I can't remember exactly where. This was in, where the hell was this? Anyways, this was somewhere in Europe. This was a volcano that erupted. And a photographer got this picture, and because there were no journalists in the area, he sold it to a wire service who distributed it across the world. And then I think it was in Australia, a newspaper reader looked at it and was like, nah, something is wrong with it. Or I think it was a photo editor in Australia who saw the picture and was like, there's something wrong with it. So then he contacted Reuters, who distributed the image, and said, listen, you might want to ask the photographer to send you the original picture. That's the original picture. And so right away, Reuters had to send out, so yeah, those are the two pictures side by side. And so Reuters then had to send out a kill picture to say to all editors, all photo editors across the world, to kill the picture.
Wow.
Because it was a lie. So this is how serious this is. So luckily in this case, the person wasn't a professional photojournalist, it was just a hobby photographer who happened to get a good picture and managed to sell it to the wire service. We already spoke about this picture here, where the photographer lied and got fired. This is another case where a photographer shooting a golf tournament produced a nice picture, nice clean picture. This golfer holding up the golf ball, whatever. I can't remember what happened. I think he made a shot and he was proud of it, and he was reacting to the fact that he made a shot. That's the actual picture. Now, there's nothing wrong with cropping a picture. Cropping a picture is fine. The problem with this picture is that the photographer erased the person behind here to create that. Photographer got fired. You can't do that. If the thing is, we are there to document what happened. If you remove this, then it becomes a visual lie. It doesn't work. It doesn't cut it. And I know that there are people who do it, but we can't give readers, we can't give the public any reason to doubt the veracity of what it is that we produce. The Economist got into serious hot water for this one. And this is what happens sometimes when illustrators get a little bit too overzealous and think that what they're handling is art and not journalism. What we're doing is not art. Of course, there are times when the lines blur, but we have to remember that we are documenting what is happening. And in this case, Obama was not standing here by himself. There were two other people. And what they did to make it a cleaner picture, a nicer picture, for sure it's nicer, was to erase the person standing here. It's not the truth. It didn't happen. There was somebody standing beside him. Right. So this created a lot of stink globally when this photographer, I'm not sure if everybody is aware of the International Photojournalism Competition annual World Press Photo. It's there's an exhibition in Montreal every year. Well, this year, this one, sorry? Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. This one photographer won for a series of pictures that he did documenting, what was it? Basically, he documented life in an industrial Belgian town, in Belgium. And it turns out that what he did, what the photographs that he had were basically all staged. And the reason it came to light was when the people who we asked to pose for him said, "Listen, this is all crap." Right? So he was accused of misrepresenting the name of the town where the images were taken. The mayor of the industrial town has basically described the study as a serious distortion of reality. So instead of capturing pictures that actually happened, or pictures of things that actually happened, showing a certain aspect of the town, he basically had people staged. So in this case, this picture here on the screen is an image from a series called Dark Heart of Europe by Giovanni Truscio, I can't pronounce his last name, which won Contemporary Issues category in World Press Photo 2015. The scene showing people having sex in a car was staged by the photographer, and one of the participants was his friend. That's not journalism. That is simply not journalism. You can't do stuff like that. It's a lie. If something happened and you missed it, then you missed it. It's as simple as that. Don't recreate it. Don't stage it. Don't create it into something just because it makes a nice story. Right? I remember, for those of you who remember the Ochre crisis, talking about allowing the truth to get in the way of a good photograph. During the Ochre crisis, there was this one guy who would dress up in First Nations dress, walking around. I think this was in Oka at the time. It wasn't in Ganawag. It was in Oka, walking around dressed like a First Nations person. And there was a lot of photographers from overseas who showed up, saw this person, not knowing who he was, and took pictures and sent the pictures on the wire overseas. And then the Canadian photo editors saw this and then contacted the Canadian photographers and asked them why they didn't have the picture. And they basically said, "Listen, this guy is full of crap." So the photographers from overseas basically photographed this person and didn't bother talking to him to verify who he was. Can't do that. You have to be very, very careful. All right, so this is a case of this one photographer. It's another image from the series. The image was captioned, "Philip lives in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the town." But the man was in fact a well-known local figure who ran a wine bar. Again, the picture was staged. It's a nice picture, but it doesn't show what the photographer was trying to, the story that the photographer was trying to tell. Now, in this one, this is the series that I was telling you about the photographer who went and did an 8-year study looking at prostitutes in this Spanish town. And at first, like I said, the prostitutes told him, "No, we don't want our pictures taken." And so he went back another time, maybe another year, whatever, where there were different women, and spent years pretending to be a land surveyor so that he could sneak pictures of them. Now, his excuse was that, I think this is what he wrote, knowing that these women would likely not want their photos taken for obvious reasons, he cleverly disguised himself as a surveyor, and got pictures of the, let's see if I can find. So this is his excuse that one of the many problems with images depicting drug use, alcoholism, and poverty is that it can sometimes do more to shame and stigmatize the subjects than shed light on the sources of the suffering. in an attempt to overcome that challenge, I created multiple exposure portraits to look at the causes rather than the effects. I mean, you can't do stuff like that. We cannot lie about who we are as journalists in order to get the shot or to get the stories that we want. We can't lie. We can't accept payment, and we can't pay for services. It's absolutely unethical to do that. And in a case like this, these women are absolutely exploited, because who knows, for whatever reason, they didn't want to have their pictures taken. Maybe it would have made their lives even more dangerous. Maybe they didn't want their parents to know, or their families to know what it is that they were doing. You just don't do that. You just don't do that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we have to consider when thinking about you know, whether or not to take a picture, or how to go about getting certain pictures, or how to go about dealing with people and talking to people. At the end of the day, and this is the other thing, the other problem that I have with this picture is that because he lied to the women, because he pretended to be somebody who he was not in order to get the pictures, he didn't verify with each of the women that they were indeed prostitutes. What if one of the pictures that he took wasn't, the person was the prostitute? What's that going to do to reputation? You have to talk to people. You have to verify every single thing that you do. So, yeah. Any questions? Any comments, any thoughts, any concerns?
Yes, Elaine. You're muted.
Okay, Phil. Yeah, I have a question or comment about these photographers.
Yeah.
Who consider themselves photojournalists. Don't they know better? I mean, they're putting their livelihoods at risk. Obviously, they were discovered. And the other part of the question, speaking about World Press Photo, I have lots of questions, by the way. Sorry. World Press Photo, wouldn't the judges pick up on something before they actually make an award to a false image? Yeah,
so to answer your first question, yes, some of the photographers know better. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are just starting their career. Sometimes they work primarily in other areas of photography and then decide to sort of explore aspects of photojournalism, not sometimes understanding the responsibilities that come with that. There's a wide range of answers to that question.
Okay.
When it comes to World Press, there usually is a very, very stringent vetting process. You know, I've entered the contest before, and I've had to have my editors vouch for the stuff that I'm putting in. You have to not swear, but pledge or promise that the work that you're putting forward is in fact true. And so in this case, he clearly lied.
Yeah. And he was discovered afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know why he would have wanted to have, you know, taken that risk, but he did, and he got caught.
Mm-hmm. I have another question. There's a feedback. Okay, maybe I just recently finished Lindsay Adario's book, It's What I Do. And you smiling, you must know about her. That book was, you know, documenting mostly the earlier 2000s, where she was in the worst places in the world at the time, very dangerous. And there were a couple occasions where she got kidnapped and thought she would be killed. So I'm just wondering, for you, were you ever in any situation where you felt threatened or in terrible danger?
A couple times. The last one I can remember was again in Haiti. It was during one of the elections, and there were riots and whatnot. You know, people basically trying to make their voices be heard. And I went to a roadblock, and you know, there was a bonfire, there were tires and everything, and I was there trying to get pictures. And there are a couple of guys on one side who yelled at me in Creole to not take pictures of them. And I said, listen, I'm not taking pictures of you, don't worry. And I was there shooting, and I heard a little noise to my right. And when I looked around, there was a guy with a long knife about yay long, maybe about,
Oh, wow.
and somebody pulling him back. And yeah, so I don't know what would have happened if this other person hadn't come by and yanked him away.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a hard, wow. Yeah, that book was a page turner, by the way, if anybody's interested in reading about her, reading her books.
Yeah, and see, this is the thing too, is, when it's what I've told my students, I don't teach anymore because I just don't have the time, but what I used to tell my students is that, for me, and I think it works also for others, that if you really have to genuinely care about the people that you're reporting on, and if you do, chances are they will open up to you. The thing to do is to always respect them, because, and sometimes respect can take different forms. Sometimes, even when they say, don't take my picture, there are times when you unfortunately have to. And if you have to apologize, you apologize. But there are times when, the public's right, the public's need to know sort of overrides their desire for privacy, their desire for not being seen or not being shown as, or not in their best light. It's a very, very tough call sometimes. And, it's sometimes knowing when to draw the line and where to draw the line, and balancing that with your responsibility. Again, if I was in Rwanda at one point, and it's people back here in Montreal are depending on me to let them know what's going on. There are people in other places around the world who are depending on me to let them know what's going on. And so if somebody says to me, if something is happening right in front of me and the person says to me, don't take my picture, it's a tough call. It's a tough call sometimes. If it's a breaking news situation where, there's a lot of stuff happening and whatnot, then in a case like that, I usually ignore them. If it's a case of a funeral, depending, it's sometimes, experience dictates whether you go ahead and shoot or whether you don't. Sometimes it's what other reporters around you are doing. Sometimes we look at each other and say, let's just let it go and just back off. It's really, really hard. The thing though is, what I found is that a lot of times people make assumptions about whether or not we are pushing our way in. What I found is that in many, many cases of tragedy, people want to talk. They come to us, we go to them and say, listen, this is who I am. Would you like to share? Would you like to speak? Would you like to say, how does this affect you? And they open up. And a lot of times, I think why they do that is because in the case of a family member, it's because they want the person to be remembered. They want to make sure that the public has their version of who this person is. They want this person to be remembered as somebody important. And, if we as media don't cover it, it seems as if, or it can come across as if they don't matter. I remember once I was sent up north to one of the First Nations communities because I think there was a bunch of people who drowned. I think they drowned. They had gone hunting and they drowned. And I was sent up with a writer, and there was no other media there. And it was really tough because we know that I can't remember, it was maybe 4 or 5 people in one family who died. And I said, we can't assume that they don't want to talk. We can't assume that just because they're hurting, they're going to be upset if we show. We cannot assume that ever. We have to give them the opportunity to say no. And so we went up, and luckily one person was actually just backing into the drive at the time. And I went up and I said, listen, this is who we are. Do you want to talk to us? And she said, yeah, just give us a second. Let me just talk to the parents inside. And she went inside and I came back. I said, yeah, you guys come on in. And they just, sometimes people don't want to talk. Sometimes the thing is, you cannot assume that you're going to offend them by asking. You cannot assume, because at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to report. You have a responsibility to document. We have to document our lives. Give them the opportunity to say no. Don't assume that they will. So yeah.
Thank you. That's
Any
wow.
other, any other
It's so
questions?
interesting. I'm so sorry, but I really have to leave. I'm really sorry, but I have a very important call at 8:30 because of my friend who's ill, but I've enjoyed it very, very much. Sorry.
Thank you very much for
Thank
sticking
you
around,
so
for
much.
being patient and everything. And if you need to get a hold of me, you can reach me anytime.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dina. Are there any other questions or comments? Just feel free to unmute and jump in.
Yeah, well, I have one more.
Sure.
Phil, I just got a message from the Montreal Camera Club that you interviewed, or I don't know, I haven't watched it yet, through Global News. You did an article on Ron Gesser.
Yes, yesterday, yeah.
I have to watch that. What? We should show it now. You want to show it now? Well, okay, it's up to you. How, I don't know. I didn't watch it myself yet. Are you actually interviewing Ron?
It all happened yesterday. The story aired yesterday.
Yeah, but well, I guess I'll just watch it. I'll watch it myself. Well, that's very nice. Yeah, Ron takes very nice portraits of very interesting people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's nice. Nice for both of you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess if there's no more questions or comments, I think it's a good time to wrap up this session. Phil, do you have any last word you wanna add?
Just to say, if anybody wants to reach me at any time, feel free. If you have any questions about images that you see published in magazines or newspapers that bothers you or that concerns you, that you have questions about, just contact the paper, contact the photographer, and talk to them. Because very often it's very easy for us to jump to conclusions about what happened in the moment. The only thing you see is that picture, nothing outside the border. Yeah, don't be afraid to, the easy thing to do is to get upset and not say anything. The hard thing to do, and I think the more important thing to do, is to reach out, because, two things can happen. You can either learn something, or the person who's the author of the image or the story, whatever the case may be, can learn something. And, I'm all for dialogue. I'm all for exchange. I'm all for, communication is important.
Yeah. And Elaine said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, I just wondered if I could ask how Phil began his career in photojournalism. What inspired him?
Yeah, the thing that inspired me was actually when the first time I saw a photograph, and I was probably maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I think what struck, and at the time I didn't understand that until many, many years later when I finished high school. What struck me was the fact that you could grab a piece of history, a piece of time, a piece of something, and carry it with you and show everybody, so look at this, look at this, look at this. That's what did it for me.
That's amazing. Elaine just said in the chat, inspiring presentation, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you
And
very much.
yeah, one of the things that I learned from your lectures today was that journalism or photojournalism is not art, but it's about documenting and showing the truth about the world. So that was really inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, some people, I mean, there are times when it blurs a little bit, but I mean, for sure there is room for interpretive photojournalism. I think the important thing is to sort of label it as such, label it as, for example, if people take pictures in black and white, yes, for sure, we know it's not real because the world isn't presented in black and white. And in a case like this image where this person did a series of pictures sort of looking at residential school survivors, basically they have a picture of the survivor and they superimpose it with the former residential school. And so that was their way of sort of illustrating the trauma that these people are still experiencing. So in a case like that, it's still documenting trauma. It's just another way of documenting trauma. And that's one way of doing photojournalism. But it's important in a case like that to sort of label it as such, as illustration and not straight on photography,
Great.
And in cases like these, they're usually presented as a series, and so there's a big write-up about what a series is about, and so there are times when it sort of blurs, but when it comes to straight news, photographing news, it's not art in the sense that you are making something up. You're simply documenting what's happening in front of your lens, and that's important. And there are limits as to how far you can go in adjusting the color or adjusting the brightness or the darkness and all of other sorts. In every news organization, there's strict limits on how far you can go. Very, very strict limits, and you can be fired for that, for not abiding.
Wow. So yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and everything for your lecture. It was really inspiring. So thank you for being here today and speaking with us. And yes, thank you to everyone for coming here and sticking around until the end. Thank you for your patience, and yeah, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience and technical issues at the beginning, but yeah, thanks so much for staying with us until the end. So yeah, thank you everyone.
I probably owe everybody a coffee though.
Thank
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. It was our pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, everyone, Phil, and everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.